All politics is identity politics.
Hey guys, Kevin DeAnna here. Welcome to Identity Politics, and I am here with Dr. Greg Johnson in the Eternal City. We are talking about what's happening to Europe today because right now, gotta be honest, everybody's blackpilling because we had one regime in Europe that everybody thought was like the bulwark against everything. And now all the identitarians are freaking out because Viktor Orban, after a very long time, has fallen. But it does not seem that the person who is replacing him is going to be as reliably liberal as Ursula von der Leyen thinks. So, you have a lot of experience with Hungary. Does everybody just need to calm down, or is this really the end?
It might be the end for Orban, but it isn't the end for Orbanism.
Which is, of course, kind of what we want, right?
Right.
I mean,
So, no, seriously, I've been following Hungarian politics for a long time, 16 years now. And I have spent a lot of time in Hungary since the spring of 2015. I don't claim to be an expert in this. Of course, it would be arrogant of me just because I've watched a few Béla Tarr movies to tell Hungarians about their politics and culture. However, I have been following this more closely than a lot of Americans, and I don't think it's a terrible catastrophe. So there's a couple reasons why Orban did badly. Some of them were not in his control. Basically, the bad luck of being a poor landlocked country in the shadow of richer countries that had a moral and psychological panic over COVID.
right.
And basically shut down the continent. Now, they could well afford those luxury beliefs, but smaller countries like Hungary and other countries in the East
So they've
couldn't.
never really recovered.
They never really recovered. They did all the COVID spending and stuff like
Right.
that, but they have their own currency. It's a somewhat soft currency, the forint, and they've had serious inflation since then and economic stagnation. And that's, of course, disappointing to Hungarians, and Hungarians, like any people, like to blame who's ever in charge for their economic woes.
Right.
But honestly, Orban could have just thrown up his head and say, I didn't do nothing, it's not my fault. Blame it on the EU, blame it on the global COVID panic, but people aren't in a forgiving mood. There's a whole generation of younger voters who are now voting. He's been in office 16 years. A lot of the younger voters don't remember how horrible things were before he was in office.
Right.
So these are structural problems that he just inherited. There were some mistakes that he made, though, and I'll talk about some of those mistakes, because those were the mistakes that gave his rival, Peter Magyar, the chance to not only win, but have a landslide victory.
And I should pause and say, boy, did that guy get lucky with his name. I mean, it's like de Gaulle with France. I mean, like, come on, man.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What is the simulation doing here? This is too perfect.
Yeah, it's too perfect. And in Hungarian, there's a verb version of Magyar, which means to speak plainly.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so
now I'm beginning to think, like, come on, how deep does this go?
Well, they're praising themselves, right? Because everyone criticizes their language. So in Hungarian, to Magyarize is actually to speak more clearly and plainly than anybody else. But anyway, no, he's very lucky. There are three main reasons why Orban lost, I think, and these can be traced back to decisions that he made. The first is that it's never a good look for a nationalist to be too closely identified with the nationalism and national interests of other nations other than your own. It makes you look like a philanderer, right?
Yeah, maybe there's some lessons.
There's some lessons here. And in Orban's case, he was regarded widely by perfectly normie Hungarians who are not ideologically inclined at all as overly sycophantic to Trump, Netanyahu, and Putin.
That's kind of an accomplishment to be that all three of them, too sympathetic to all three of them at the same time.
Well, they look like natural friends of his, right? Every European conservative, every American conservative lives in fear of being pointed at and accused of being anti-Semitic. So you take out lavish insurance policies against that by buttering up Jews. And of course, what Orban did is he buttered up the Jews that were most ideologically similar to him, namely Likud, and of course, their leader, Netanyahu. He's
Bad
nominal.
timing for that. I mean,
Bad timing, terrible timing for that.
not to mention J.D. Vance showing up to Hungary,
Yeah.
what, a week and a half ago? I mean...
The timing was terrible. So the Putin thing really hurt him, though. And this is a weird thing about national populists in Europe and in America. A lot of national populists in Europe and America are sort of marinated in Russia memes. And Putin is sort of a cool meme, and people think that Russia is a bastion of Christian conservatism.
Yeah, right.
And that's very effective propaganda. It's not really true. And yet a lot of people cling to this. And one of the reasons they cling to this is, I call it the secret friend syndrome. You want to believe that you've got friends in high places,
Yeah, right.
powerful friends.
Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. Pretty incredible accomplishment for him to be on the wrong side of all these countries at once in the eyes of his countrymen, especially Putin. I mean, explain that. How does he end up getting an unpopular reputation because of being too close to Putin?
Well, this is a thing in the Hungarian far right. It's not confined to Fidesz. You saw it in the Jobbik party when they were still based.
Right.
You see this in Mihazan.
And they're just like centrist now with the Jobbik, right?
Yeah. But they all had this very unpopulist position, namely they were very pro-Russian. And that's because a lot of this stuff comes from the online right. A lot of these people, even somebody the age of Orban, a lot of his takes are caused, come from marination in the online right, and there's a lot of very effective pro-Russian propaganda narratives, memes, and stories about Russia being a bulwark of white Christian civilization that a lot of people believe. And Orban believed that. But beyond that, Orban wanted to believe that. Why did he want to believe it? Because he was looking for a counterweight to NATO and the United States. He's looking for friends other than the West because he's fundamentally at odds with the West. He doesn't want to go in the direction of the West. And there's this thing I call secret friend syndrome, where people on the right convince themselves that powerful people are their secret friends. We had this sustaining QAnon. QAnon was sustained by the idea that not only did we have Donald Trump, but a whole secret network of powerful people.
Everybody's in the military. They're all getting ready to do this.
Yeah. And Putin is a lot of Westerners' secret friends. They believe hopelessly, passionately that he's really on their side. And it's just not the case. It's just delusional. Orban had both delusional and, I think, rational reasons for being pro-Putin. But it became very obvious that this was sycophantic, certainly recently when tapes of them were revealed with Orban basically acting like Putin's valet. This doesn't sit well with Hungarians. Hungarians are, for right or wrong, they're very anti-Russian. They're not just anti-Russian.
No, they've got some pretty good reasons to be anti-Russian.
They're not just anti-Russian for 1956 and 45 years of communism. They're not just anti-Russian for 1944, 45. You scratch a Hungarian and they'll start complaining about the Russians invading them in 1849. One time I was visiting Hungary in the spring of 2017. I was in a menswear store trying on something, and a couple Russians came in and they sniffed around, and they were kind of rude to the guy who was working there. And after they left, he said, "Oh, these Russians are so rude. Would it kill them to be nice?" And then he started ranting about 1849. This is some guy in his 30s. Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, this is what it's like to be in a country where people have a long historical memory.
So have a country, which
yeah, it's part of their identity. And so this has always been unpopular, and it's even unpopular amongst liberals. It's universally unpopular. I met this one Hungarian man who grew up under communism. He is in his 50s, mid-50s maybe at the time. He's probably around 60 now. And I asked him and his wife, so did you study Russian when you were in high school? Was that your language? And he said, and he's like some centrist liberal, probably voted for anybody but Orban. And he said, well, if you were too enthusiastic about learning Russian, you are considered a traitor to the Hungarian people. This is how liberals talk in Hungary.
Right.
And he said, our language was German. We have always been in with the Germans. And I thought, this is fascinating. So this
cozying up to Putin is not a smart electoral move.
It's a very unpopulist position to take. And when the Ukraine war came, a lot of Hungarians, all up and down the political spectrum, were horrified that war had returned to Europe. They don't particularly like Ukraine, but when you compare Ukraine and Russia and recognize that Ukraine is a big country that keeps Russia far from their borders, most of them just thought it was bizarre that the people on the right were doubling down with the pro-Russian talking points. And this happened in this election right up to the end. For months, Orban was apparently running against Zelensky. Zelensky's face was all over the posters. Zelensky and Ursula von der Leyen.
It was really strange.
And also occasionally Peter Magyar, but he was running against Zelensky. And then at the end of the thing, just before the actual election, his face started appearing. And he's gotten kind of fat. So they found a kind of flattering semi-profile and put the national colors behind them. And the
vibes were all wrong.
The slogan was, "Let's unite against the war." And it's like he's losing badly. And his final election slogan is to double down on one of his most unpopular positions. And at that point, it started to smack of Trump throwing away his presidency to start a war for Bibi Netanyahu. It's like he was sleepwalking into disaster. A lot of Hungarians they can't forgive a nationalist if he's looking out not just for, they expect politicians to look out for their own interests.
Right.
But to see a politician, in effect,
looking out for the politician interests in other countries.
Yeah, and against his own interests at the very end, that was weird.
Yeah.
That's a weird vibe. And then, of course, Netanyahu, Hungarians all think that Jews are a distinct people. Distinct people, distinct identity.
Anyone who knows the history of the 56 uprising knows that.
Oh yeah, but even if they love them, even if they love Jews and they have the best Hungarian Jewish neighbors, they still think they're a different group. Mm-hmm. And the Jews think of themselves that way too. It's just the mentality they have. They think of them as a different people.
Yeah.
In America, we tend to think of Jews as people with a different religion.
They just have a different religion.
Yeah, but in Central and Eastern Europe, that's just the way it is. They think of them as a distinct people with distinct interests and maybe even conflicting interests. Therefore, even if you are moderate or even pro-Jewish, when you see your president doing things like standing up with Netanyahu when it was very clear that what was going on in Gaza was tantamount to genocide, and when he was indicted by the International Criminal Court in 2024 for war crimes, Orban took Hungary out of the ICC and then rolled the red carpet out for Netanyahu to visit.
But why? Like, what's to be gained?
Well, that's what a lot of people were wondering. What's going on here? Then, as the election was approaching, he was bragging, Hungary will someday have the biggest Jewish community in Europe because they're all coming here to be safe from anti-Semitism. So migration is okay. Ethnic replacement is okay as long as it's Jews. Again, even if you are positively inclined towards Jews.
It's a bizarre argument to be making.
Yeah, you look at that and think, what's wrong here? It's like he's hostage to another foreign leader. And then finally, Trump. It was very bad timing to have an anti-war slogan after a new war starts that's going to cause untold economic chaos, especially for a country that's already economically on the ropes.
Because you can say whatever you want about if people were like, oh, well, actually, this is good for America's oil prices or whatever, this is all planned. There's no scenario where this is good for European consumers because fuel prices are going to go through the roof. And that's what people care about on like an everyday level.
The figure that was quoted for me is that 5% of Hungary's GDP is going to be gobbled up with rising energy prices. That's significant. That's the difference between
people notice things like that.
Working and not working, paying bills and not paying bills for a lot of people living on the margins. This is serious business. Now, the Vance visit might have been planned a long time ago, but honestly, Orban should have waved him away. And not long before the Vance visit, they had CPAC Hungary. Now, CPAC Hungary is part of, I think, a very sound strategy that Orban has of meta-political outreach. He's trying to convince Western conservatives to be more nationalist and populist, which we want.
Right.
Unfortunately,
the way he did it,
it's a two-way street. Hungarians have this sort of superstitious fear of drafts. They're afraid of the wind will make them sick. And that Overton window is wide open and this draft from America was coming in. There's a backwash of populism, slopulism, as one of our friends calls it, from MAGA. And so the last CPAC Hungary, they were waving American flags. Your average normie Hungarian will look at that and think, what is that?
Nobody likes that.
Even if they love America, they're going to think, what is this? And then Vance shows up during this war while Trump is melting down on social media, acting like a mad emperor. The whole thing was a bad look. And I think that's when people were citing that Polymarket's odds just suddenly diverged in Magyar's favor.
I don't understand why, and this goes for Elon Musk too, like why they think a powerful figure in one country endorsing somebody else in another country is a good idea. And this goes for the left too. I mean, how many times do you remember have the Republicans successfully run on something like, oh, the president of France endorsed like this guy. That means vote for our guy instead. I mean, it's just, nobody likes foreigners telling you what to do. And especially nationalists.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you can't play that game.
Yeah. I'm very critical of America, but I have an immediate annoyance when foreigners start talking about American politics. I can say
things about the American government. You can't say anything about the American government.
This is why I'm very cautious about saying too much about Hungary. But by the same token, I'm talking as an American and as a foreign nationalist looking for lessons that we should take from this. So the big error is that Orban, being a nationalist, actually seemed to be more concerned with the national interests of other countries than his own country. And during his last 4 years, he's been talking about nothing but foreign policy. And again, Hungarians don't like that, just like Americans don't like that when Trump is jetting around the world, starting or putting out fires. They don't like that. They feel neglected. Their lives are hard and getting harder, and they want their president focused with his finite energy and resources on local problems. So that was a big problem. Another problem was corruption. Now, you and I are fine. I want to defend corruption to some extent. What's called corruption.
Right.
What's called corruption by a lot of people is giving actual benefits to your political constituency.
Right.
Of course, liberals would never dream of giving benefits to their constituents.
All these government programs are just a technocratic way to solve social problems.
Yes, they're not
They're not bribes to voters.
They're not bribes to voters. But when a populist conservative type comes along who's actually delivering Well, the first people who get huffy about that are principled conservatives, right? Principled conservatives who, when they look at the prospect of power, the first thing they start talking about is ways they can tie their hands, the balanced budget. How about Christian just war theory? Anything to tie their hands, right? Well, Orban doesn't think that way. He's an actual smart politician, so he delivered. Another thing he did is he not only gave favors to his friends, he cleared out patronage networks in institutions that were occupied by leftists who were impeding
dating back to
him.
the communist days in some cases.
Old commies. He was getting rid of these people. This is good. However, I find it very difficult to, and corruption in the legitimate sense, the disgusting sense, the treasonous sense, is taking money to sell out your own people.
Right. There's definitely clean graft and dirty graft.
Yeah.
Clean graft is giving a government job who could go to anyone and giving it to your friend.
Yeah.
Dirty graft is when you're like taking bribes from foreigners or
Yeah.
private interests to screw people over so you can have money.
Exactly. That kind of stuff I don't think he was guilty of, although some people think, well, he's obviously
There'll probably be some investigations now.
Yeah, he's obviously getting clout from sucking up to Netanyahu and stuff like that. But so anyway, it's hard to defend the clean kind of graft, though, given the fallout from a couple years ago to a scandal that broke in 2024. Back in 2019, the head of a state orphanage was thrown in jail for sexually molesting boys. And one of his underlings, a guy named Andrei Konya, was thrown in jail for intimidating the witnesses into silence.
Yeah, I remember this now.
Yeah, and so the guy had a not terribly rigorous or long sentence, and he was like 6 or 9 months from the end of the sentence, and he didn't want to serve it out. And anyway, his family were friends with the Calvinist bishop, a guy named Zoltan Balog, familiar name in our circles. And Zoltan Balog was the mentor of Katalin Novak, who is the Fidesz, or was the Fidesz president of Hungary. She was not the head of government, but head of state.
Right.
She listened to this and was asked, can you pardon this guy and expunge his record? And expunging his record would also expunge a 5-year ban on working with children. And she looked at this and didn't see anything wrong with it at all. And so she went to Judith Varga, who is the justice minister, and they cooked up a scheme to pardon him. And they bundled the pardon in with Pope Francis's visit in 2013. And they thought they got away with this until a year later, a journalist investigated this list and found this name and looked into it, and the scandal broke. And when everyone saw this,
so this is like their Epstein scandal.
Yeah,
in the
this
sense.
was just obviously an abuse of patronage. I have a friend, and he has a friend, and oh yes, he was involved in covering up pedophilia, but why not pardon him?
Yeah, but what are you going to do?
I mean, it was the stupidest thing in the world. And Orban was shocked by it, and he basically forced both women to resign. End of story, right? Well, there's a whole lot more to it than that, because it turns out that Judith Varga's ex-husband is Peter Magyar, the new prime minister of Hungary. So this scandal is just the gift that has
incredible,
echoed forward, and now there's a new prime minister.
Change.
But here's the thing: it is legit corruption, and legit corruption not in a financial sense, but in the sense of patronage. And Orban, it blew up in his face.
Yeah,
now,
it's like Trump pardoning like some of these random people who've been convicted of various racketeering and smuggling and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, but it hasn't blown up in his face yet.
Not yet.
But the Hungarians, it was just so obviously an evil thing. If Trump tried to pardon Epstein posthumously or wipe his record clean, it would be
this guy was still alive.
it would be something like that. That would
be like pardoning Maxwell, I guess, or something.
Which is a distinct possibility. They were actually floating that idea. So anyway, and I hope they had the good sense not to do that politically as well as morally. But anyway, this was a legit example of corruption. And people always say that, oh, so-and-so's corrupt. It's mostly vague, but this is very concrete and it looks bad. And even though Orban, I think his hands were clean, he put these women in these positions of power. And as I put it in my article, I don't want to be the guy who, looks at the black doctor and says, did he get here through affirmative action?
Yeah, right.
But I do. And when I look at these women, I think, did they get there because they were the best person for the job or because they were women?
Right.
And people
even
on
the
the right,
illiberal democracy needs
even
to
in a liberal democracy,
illiberal democracy, yeah.
Illiberal democracy, they think, well, if we can find somebody that the progressives would fetishize spouting our talking points, that just makes us cleaner, right?
Yeah, right.
That's insurance. If he was doing that, well, it blew up in his face. And then the final thing is just immigration, his signature issue. He actually let Magyar steal to the right of him on his signature issue. And this is just folly on Orban's part. Orban stood up against the migrant wave in 2015.
For which he deserves eternal credit.
Yeah, and he rallied a lot of people to do that. He built a border fence, and he's been good on this, and he's suffered from this. The EU is
the EU
persecuted
was fining
him.
him every single day some outrageous amount of money for not going along with various migration pacts and everything else, and he just said, screw it, we're going to pay.
But here's the thing. It wasn't quite that bad because they were really just docking his allowance. So they ended up just paying less.
Yeah. Which is one of the things that I think people need to understand about Hungary is they still fund me, because every once in a while people will be like, why don't they just leave the EU? It's like, because they're still
getting
money
subsidized from the EU.
The reason these things happen, it's sort of like in the States where people say like, oh, the federal government says don't do this. Well, why don't you just not
do it?
Yeah, because you're getting money from the federal government and you can't do without it. I mean, that's how they get you.
Yeah. You could do without it, but you'll be
now
thrown out of office the next
and now
next
you don't
round.
have roads, and if you try to explain to voters that the reason you don't have roads is because you're standing up for local power, no one's going to care.
And your opponent's going to say, I'm going to get the sweet federal money.
Yeah, right.
And that's one of the things that Magyar was hinting around he could do. He could get all that sweet EU money unlocked.
Right.
And so people looked fondly upon that. Billions and billions of
50
dollars
billion euros, I think.
Of euros in COVID relief funds were embargoed, which might have really helped the COVID recovery. So Orban has brought a lot of industry to Hungary. He's made deals with Mercedes-Benz, he's made deals with Samsung, he's made deals with this big Chinese firm that manufactures electric vehicles. Their European factory is going to be in China. Sounds great.
The best deals.
Not all these jobs are going to Hungarians because they're importing tons of guest workers from places like the Philippines.
So here we have the typical thing where we're bringing in these deals, but it's like the economy for the economy's sake as opposed to for the people's sake.
Whose economy is this helping?
Yeah, what difference does it make if Mercedes-Benz is in Budapest or wherever if no Hungarians get jobs out of it?
Yeah.
Who cares?
And one of the strongholds for Fidesz was the Hungarian countryside. Budapest would always vote for the left, but the rest of the country was solidly pro-Fidesz. So suddenly these factories are popping up, and you're finding that they're domiciling colonies of people from places like the Philippines in the Hungarian countryside. So there was this conversation I had with this based Hungarian guy who thinks he's liberal, but they have very based liberals there. And he said, yeah, I was out in the country and I got on a bus with my friend and we were shocked. We were the only white people on a bus.
Yeah, even in Hungary. It's like this.
And that's an experience that the Hungarians didn't have even 5 years ago.
Right.
That's thanks to Orban. There's been a massive influx of these foreign guest workers. No, they're not on track to citizenship or anything, but they still change daily life. And why bring jobs in if they're not going to your people?
Right. What's the point?
Magyar said, I'm going to send back all these guest workers. That made him to the right of Orban. So these three things are the reason why he had advantages. Now, other advantages were lots of libtards and leftists were just anti-Orban.
Yeah, they're going to vote for anyone but him.
Anyone but Orban. But he actually got votes from people who otherwise would have voted for Orban because he outflanked Orban on being more nationalist and more populist and promising to end corruption, which is a
It's
real
also
thing.
kind of a populist theme. I mean, what is
Anti-corruption
populism
is-
in a sentence? We have to oppose the corrupt elites.
Yeah, exactly. And the immigration thing. Now, a lot of people don't trust the guy, and there's every reason not to trust him. He seems like an unprincipled, power-hungry little weasel.
You can work with that, though. I mean, that's the whole point, is you can pressure guys like that into doing what you want.
Absolutely. My
I'd much
prediction-
rather have like a guy who has no principles whatsoever than a guy who's principled for things I don't like.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, my opponent's an honorable man. Well, that's another reason to hate him. Like,
Yeah,
that's the last
absolutely.
thing I want.
I always hate these arguments that people make where they attack their enemies for betraying their enemy's principles. He's a hypocrite.
Yeah, right.
They're the real racists,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. No, when I see my enemies betraying their principles, I applaud them
Yeah, right.
because I reject their principles.
And also, just from a political point of view, you have to think about it in terms of, and this gets to the core of maybe what a lot of this election was about in terms of how right-wingers should act. You're not going to change the mind of the politician. Like, this is the thing which nobody understands. They're like, oh, if we could just get 5 minutes alone with whoever,
Yeah.
like, we're going to tell them that Europe is dying or something. Like, do you think they don't know? Like, no, the only thing they're going to do is they're going to respond to incentives. But if you've got somebody who will respond to these kinds of incentives, you can work with that. You can create grassroots anti-immigration stuff and they'll do what you want. It's the guy who like really believes in open border stuff, who is willing to pay a political cost and go down with the ship. That's the guy you need to be afraid of. I don't care if he's a saint in his personal life. In fact, I'd hate him more.
Yeah. Magyar was married to the Fidesz justice minister. He's a lawyer.
So he's at least familiar with some of this stuff, too.
All of his friends, he's probably somewhat socially conservative. He's surrounded by Fidesz adjacent and former Fidesz sort of technocratic types. He's ridden the left wing and centrist and everything crank vote against Orban into power, but he has a party called TISA, which is just a synthetic party. It's like Macron's fake party, right?
Oh, yeah, you just kind of come up with something and slap everybody underneath it.
Yeah, and people are saying, oh, now he's going to come in and he's going to change the Constitution and prosecute and persecute and defund. I'm not even sure he can basically rule his own party.
Yeah, right. The minute they try to do something, it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah, if he can't, I'm not sure he can rule his own party. I don't know if he can discipline his own party to vote with him on everything. I'm sure he can get them to vote for things that are good, like motherhood issues, ending corruption. Do you stand against corruption? They should get 100% of the parliament on their side. If Orban and Fidesz are smart and not bitter and obstructionist, what they'll do is they'll gladly vote on anything that actually makes the country better, along with TISA. And if TISA tries to do something crazy like go on the euro or something, which really would be bad for Hungary. Hungary has the kind of economy that Italy or Greece has, heavily dependent on export crops and tourism. A weak currency is extremely valuable to countries like that, and they should keep that. So going on the euro would be a bad thing, but I think that if he tried to do something like that and there was an actual vote, some of his people would probably vote against that along with Fidesz. And so I think he's going to be boxed in.
But why are so many European identitarians, including a lot of people all of them basically I respect. I mean, there's nobody who...
A lot of people I respect too.
Why are they all freaking out then? Because a lot of them are sound, and I don't think this is the typical online right, like panic, we're all going to die. But they are basically saying, panic, we're all going to die.
Okay, I don't
think they're just saying it to say it is my point. I think they believe it.
I think they basically were drinking the Fidesz internal Kool-Aid, basically the panic stuff to try and get everybody to vote.
So it was just a
it's
tactic,
like
kind of.
yeah. Well, but the Trump, somebody like Hillary Clinton saying that Donald Trump's a horrible fascist. She probably doesn't believe that, but she's trying to gaslight her stupid libtards to vote. Right. The trouble is that these libtards then go off believing it.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same with people catastrophizing in the Fidesz party, saying, "Oh, this is going to be terrible. He's going to throw people in jail and shut everything down and go on the euro and open the borders." They're just trying to motivate their base to get out and vote against Magyar. But I don't think it's actually true. I don't think it's as catastrophic as that.
Well, why is so many American conservatives, and here we got to bring something up. I mean, one of the things that he was trying to do, Orban that is, there's this meta-political project, and every once in a while in D.C. you would see some event, and they would be talking about Hungary's different way forward. They would do something on the birth rate, they would do something on immigration, one of these things, and you'd see all these kind of conservatives there and everything else. Well, it turns out some of these guys were basically on the payroll. And it makes sense that a lot of these people are now freaking out because now they're not on the payroll. Yeah. The mass movement led by Rod Dreher. I mean, the most charismatic figure on the American right.
Yeah, I mean, he was getting paid like $100K a year to basically soy face over beers and oysters and write dear diary entries about life in Budapest.
Don't talk about the Generalissimo that way.
Yeah.
We would die for Rod Dreher in this house.
No, he's a... But the thing is that he would say nice things to his established Western conservative audience about Orban, and that does nudge things in the right direction, and therefore it was regarded.
I mean, the thing is, it's so this whole theory that he was coming up with, Orban, of illiberal democracy. First of all, I'm not sure that's the best term, just as a term in terms of branding, because already the kind of people who you're trying to calm down and say like, oh, we're taking a different approach, but don't freak out. When they hear illiberal democracy, already warning bells are going off. So that's one. But the second thing is, despite that, it's not particularly revolutionary. It's not particularly like, you're not going to get the youth like fired up, ready to go to the mat for something like this. I don't even know what it is, because they would reject the idea of like...
just means democracy.
Yeah, but I mean, they come up with a better term.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't think he branded it that, but he characterized it as that accurately. What is liberal democracy? Liberal democracy is a beautifully crafted system for not giving the people what they want.
Right. The system designed to prevent change. Yes.
It's minority rule. Minorities have veto power over what the majority wants, even things that are absolutely necessary for the national survival. It's a terrible system.
Right.
And what Orban stands for is actual democracy. Actually giving the people what they want.
That's a better brand right there. If he had just said actual democracy, I think he would have gotten a better hearing from a lot of people.
Oh yeah, but in effect that's what he's offering. He's saying, look, populism is just what liberals call democracy. When the people vote for what they want rather than what liberals believe they should want.
Journalists and NGOs telling you what you're allowed to do.
Yeah, that's right. Orban is simply a real Democrat. And populism means giving the people what they want.
Yeah,
and he was good at that.
And he handed over power. I mean, this is what was so funny. In the aftermath, you had like Hillary Clinton. You had all these people being like, an authoritarian leader has fallen today. And like, this is a bold new age for democracy. It's like, he lost an election and left. Like, what did you think he was going to do?
He congratulated his opponent.
Yeah, like he's going to like get a gun and like start murdering everyone? Yeah. What do you want?
Well, okay, and this is important to hold on to. The people who are praising Peter Magyar are people who are stupid enough to call Orban a dictator. Well, if they're stupid enough to call Orban a dictator, maybe they're stupid enough and delusional enough to think that Peter Magyar is their boy.
Right. Although it is really hard. I mean, you got to say, it's really hard when the worst people in the world are celebrating. Yeah. Because it's very hard to be like, no, it's not as bad as I think. But like when Hillary Clinton or whoever is like really, really happy, I can't help but be a little sad.
Well, yeah, but I honestly think in this case, they're deluded. And I predicted in the piece that I published just yesterday, it will be quite soon when Magyar is going to disappoint the EU. And I think it was later the same day, I got the news that the EU had presented like 27 points that they wanted. I mean, the arrogance of these people, the arrogance. Okay.
Like, who the hell do you think you are?
They dictate 27 things they want to, and they were trying to get rid of like their attempts to raise the birth rates of educated women.
Well, that's Nazism. When people have babies, that's Nazism.
Yeah. Smart people
when some
having
people
babies.
have babies, yes.
Yeah. When smart people are encouraged to have babies, that's Nazism.
Yeah. When stupid people have babies, that's Imago Dei or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Magyar rejected all but 4 points.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
And amazingly...
And especially because the thing that's really good about this is if he had accepted those things, here's 50 billion euros, and then you can take that to make the economy better, and you'll get a little boost in popularity, and all the reporters all around the world are going to say you're the best thing ever. Like, he had to have been tempted, but I guess not.
And he does sort of give off the palpable narcissist vibe, and I could just see him basking in all this international
Nobel
attention.
Peace Prize. I mean,
all that kind of stuff. But he immediately turned around and said, no, it didn't take him long to disappoint. And this, I think, is good. I don't understand him. I don't know what he stands for, really. I don't know how he's going to govern. But there's something I do know for sure. And that is that all the forces that make Orban popular in Hungary, made him premier or prime minister for 16 years, all the forces that put Trump in office twice, that produced Brexit, that are wind in the sails of Rupert Lowe, AFD, all of these forces still exist. The reason why nationalism and populism are on the rise is because liberalism and globalism and multiculturalism and migration make society worse. And just because Orban might be defeated, or just because Trump's MAGA movement might be defeated in the next midterm elections, it doesn't mean that liberalism is going to start working.
Right.
And that means that there's going to be a continued and rising demand for the kind of policies that Orban represented. And to the extent that Peter Magyar is responsive to what the people want, he's going to start governing that way. And there are going to be built-in checks and balances, because I think he'll lose people from his party if he governs too far to the left. I think that he will suddenly have people crossing the aisle and voting with the right. And not just Fidesz, but Mi Hazon, which are legit far-right.
Right. They didn't win many seats, though. I think it was like 1, right?
I think 5 or 7.
Really? Okay.
They actually increased their seats, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. These people are...
I mean, that's always the thing people are waiting for, right? I mean, where you have national conservatism, which, I mean, that's a big discussion, what constitutes national conservatism. But
Yoram Hazony has some opinions on that.
I mean, I actually was using it before he did, I think.
Yeah.
But I was using it to refer to somebody like Jeff Sessions, if you remember him back when in the Senate.
Yeah.
But even that, of course, is not really enough. I mean, it's just sort of, but it just indicates like, okay, you're moving in a certain direction. But the question is, what's to the right of that can actually win?
Yeah.
And now you're starting to see that.
Yeah.
And I guess the big question now is, assume for the moment Hungary more or less stays a bulwark, maybe not in the same form that many expected, but it kind of holds true. I mean, the big thing coming up, of course, France. And traditionally in European history, when France goes in one direction and the rest of Europe follows soon afterward, and right now it's looking pretty good for the nationalists in France.
Yes, I do think it was good to finally... They did it through dirty tricks, but disqualifying Marine Le Pen from running yet again and losing yet again.
That brings up all the Russia stuff too, because
she was very much compromised with all that. She was sending people to ratify annexing Crimea way back in 2014. It all looks bad. She was getting getting loans and stuff like that. I mean, actual money was changing hands. So Bardella is younger, he's male. I'm sorry, I don't want to be that guy, but I do think that maybe the French need to try, the French right needs to try running a man.
Yeah.
Again, Jean-Marie Le Pen was a great figure. He's dead now. His daughter she increased the party size, there's no question about it. but she couldn't get it across the finish
She's
line.
done as much good as she can do.
She can do all she can. And this may be the lesson for Orban too. He might have done all he can.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody, this is sort of the thing, is there's sort of a boomer conservative thing in the fall of Orban where it's like, you've done this, but there comes a point where you really do just kind of have to pass it on. I mean, you can't just hold on till the end and die and then expect it all not to fall apart or something like that. I mean, I'm reminded, not that I'm comparing him to Franco, but the way it kind of went down reminds me of Franco, where you accomplished this great triumph in the past and then you just kind of hang on and hang on and hang on and hang on.
And you don't train your
replacement.
collapses,
you know? Because the other thing too is that when the whole world is telling you that you're an extremist, but you've been in power for a while, and you're constantly pushing back, like, no, actually, I'm not an extremist, I'm this, I'm moderate, I'm part of the West, whatever else, you kind of forget that you were once the firebrand, and you kind of need firebrands to replace you. I mean, you have to be willing to allow your own replacement by people who are more extreme than you.
Yeah.
I mean, you need guys to like throw you up against the wall and say, like, you're a leftist and now we're in charge.
Yeah. The people around Orban, I didn't see anybody
who's the heir?
Anywhere as smart as him. I do think he's really the smartest politician in Europe. I think he's the most ideologically sound.
Nobody holds on to power that long without knowing what they're doing.
But I think he made mistakes. Mm-hmm. And in the end, he got outfoxed and some bad luck. Without the bad luck, he might have been able to sail through the scandals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And if the economy was booming, he might have been able to sail through this.
Even with the scandals.
Even with the scandals, yeah. So I just don't know. But the bottom line is Orban might be gone, but Orbanism is going to continue. France, I think, is going in the right direction. I think AfD is growing. It's going in the right direction. I think the European parties have learned about, or can learn a valuable lesson, which is not to be too closely tied to Trump.
Or to Russia.
Or to Russia.
Or to Israel.
Or to Israel. It's very important. We want them to learn these lessons. If they learn these lessons, I think they're going to be even stronger. So I just look at this as an opportunity, not a crisis. I'm not melting down. I don't think it's the end for Hungary. The Hungarians have been on a flat, indefensible plain for more than 1,000 years because they know who they are and they're extremely stubborn. They're not going to be just forced to march off a cliff like the Germans apparently are willing to do.
Well, not all of them. I mean, as you just said, the AfD is surging. And the guys who are working in that party are putting up with more persecution than anybody in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I have nothing but the highest respect for these people. But Hungarians, I think, they're not going to suddenly become libtards because Orban's out.
But it does come down, they are still on, and I don't mean this as like a slight against Hungary, but the fact remains, they're still on the outskirts of the EU. And we're not going to win this thing unless you take the core of the EU. And that, of course, means France, and that means Germany. And
France
of course,
or Germany.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah.
And Germany, maybe taking half of Germany would be enough. The former East Germany might be enough, because that seems to be where the AfD
Bring
is
back
surging.
the Iron Curtain.
I mean, it's an interesting thought, the GDR but based. Let's see how that goes. But of course, the other big thing that you're dealing with right now is with Spain. You've got this insane strategy where they're going to bring in 500,000 illegals.
Absolutely.
More than 500,000. And those people are not going to stay in Spain.
No, they're going to be...
It's not just going to be 500,000, one, and they're going to go everywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, this is the kind of thing where it calls into question the entire European experiment, because you just can't have one country that does something like this.
No.
I mean, it's a loaded gun to the back of the skull of every country in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. So they need to be disciplined by other countries. I don't see a mechanism for that. Schengen needs to probably just end. Schengen is useful for the last man who wants to go shopping in a foreign country and doesn't want to present his passport.
Right, and I think there was sort of this assumption that we were going to have a continent of last men, but it's somehow going to stay 90% white forever, and we just won't have to think about this stuff, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
History has a way of not ending even after you tell everybody that it's ended.
Yeah.
Do you think that we're going to see it, though? Because this is the big question when it comes to Hungary. We're in a situation now, and I think this is true of America, too, where people say things like, well, they always tell us every election is the most important election of our lifetimes, and you have to learn to like see through that. I actually think it's much worse than that. It's that every election is the most important one of our lifetimes, and that becomes true every single election from here on out. Like you can't even lose power once. I mean, look at what just happened in Spain, right? I mean, you do this one thing, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Even if the conservatives win next time, what do you do with these people? Because as we've learned from efforts in America, even though I think Trump's record on immigration is a lot better, frankly, than people are willing to give him credit for, there's almost no way you can get rid of all of these people and keep the current system of government.
Yeah.
Like you literally have to get rid of the judiciary. You'd have to get rid of Congress. Congress just voted with 7 Republican votes to allow temporary protected status to Haitians. With 7 Republicans.
Absolutely. Some
So
of the
like,
most
what are you going to do with
people
this?
on the planet.
Which is why they're here. I mean, that's why they were brought in. If they had something to contribute, they'd be like sunk in the ocean, and every reporter in the universe would be like applauding on television, and adopting the sailors who are like machine gunning the survivors. But when you think of what you're going to have to do with Europe, this can't work. I mean, if your advice is, we'll just win every election forever, that's impossible because the economy is sometimes going to take a dump.
Yeah.
If you're in power long enough, you are inherently going to have problems of corruption, stagnation, incompetence. It just comes with being in power for too long. So we have to move towards something else, but how does one do this? Because if Orban couldn't swing it,
There are 2 answers to this. One is that we simply have to ban the left.
the left is certainly going to ban us.
Exactly. No,
somebody's going to ban somebody.
Somebody's going to ban somebody.
Every democracy's over, and I think we all know it at some level.
I have a essay on the end of American democracy. Multi-party democracy basically means that every few years you are willing to hand a loaded gun to your political enemies and trust that they won't use it against you.
How'd that go for Charlie Kirk?
Those days are over. And the first side in America that just owns up to that fact and puts an end to the farce will run the country until it's run into the ground.
Yep.
That's simply the truth. We have to put an end to the left before the left puts an end to us. No,
it sounds crazy, but it's actually common sense. And this is where we're going. And if you look at everywhere they have power now, they're already doing this. I mean, in my home state of Virginia, the governor, I think today, signed a law stripping the Confederate heritage organizations of nonprofit status, which basically means shutting them down. Mm-hmm. So we're already in the situation where, you have the wrong ideology, you just can't operate anymore. Like, this is already happening.
They simply have to be removed from all political power. It simply has to happen. Beyond that, though, there's a longer-term solution than that. Because, believe me, as much as I love the idea of banning the Democratic Party, the idea of the Republican Party ruling unchecked is truly terrifying. Mike Johnson with unlimited power. Imagine that.
Somehow Mike Johnson is Palpatine.
Exactly. That unlimited power thing always cracked me up.
I'd rather have Palpatine himself, frankly.
I bet Bill Clinton got really tired of hearing that kind of cackling all the time around the house. But anyway, okay. The longer term solution is simply this. We have to create a new consensus in society.
Right. And there is going to be a realignment. This happens every 80 years or so in America.
And by a consensus, I just mean this. In 2015, before Trump came down the golden escalator, there was a consensus that nobody in the major parties would compete on globalization and immigration.
Right.
There was a gentleman's agreement not to compete on that. There's basically an anti-white consensus in all of our societies. It's being chipped away at, but it's there.
It's still there.
Yeah, and people like Trump quake in fear of being called a racist, meaning a white racist. They're perfectly happy to pander to the racism of minorities. They will go to any lengths to take out insurance against being called a racist or an anti-Semite, to the point of things like the Platinum Plan and starting wars in the Middle East and so on. This is just ridiculous. The older they are, the more manacled by that mentality they are. Younger people are getting free of that. There will be a realignment, and eventually my goal is for the consensus to be pro-white, not anti-white. Meaning you can't participate in politics in a white country if you believe in anti-white policies. You'll be consigned to the outer margins of society like we are today.
Right. But even that is less true than it was not long ago. I mean, the thing too about this consensus is if you look at someone, I'm not even going to say Trump, but just that kind of generation, maybe even older Republicans, the reason that a normie conservative still takes stances that would be considered anti-white, or maybe even is anti-white, I think there's a kind of naive faith underlying it. The reason I am anti-white is because America is still basically a white country, and these other people had a raw deal, and if we're super nice, eventually this will all kind of go away, and we'll
nothing
get along.
bad can happen to us.
Right. I mean, like the guy who wrote Stuff White People Like, why is it okay to make fun of white people? Because for white people, no bad ending is possible. That is always there. But the thing is, if you are below...
South Africans.
Right. If you are below 40, certainly if you're below 30, you're not living in a white country, and you know that. I mean, most people, their views don't change based on what they had at 25. You still sort of see the world as it was when you were a kid. And if you're 50, 60, 70, you still think of America as like an 80% white country, and it's just not. And what's frightening, or perhaps exciting, depending on your perspective, is nobody thinks that this is just going to go away. It's just, you're anti-white or you're pro-white, and that's it. It really is just going to be an us or them existential type thing. The only problem, of course, is that even though people in the younger generation, white people, are being more pro-white, the non-whites are becoming far more explicitly anti-white. And as their numbers increase, we have to be prepared that that's the new consensus. That, I mean, you end up with something like the ANC in South Africa, because quantity is a quality all its own, and there are a lot of these people. And for some stupid reason, we let them vote.
Well, a lot of my friends, like Sam Dixon, for instance, you know, they keep saying it's going to end when the demographics get so far along that they have an absolute voting majority. And my response to him, and it caught him a little short, I said, what did your ancestors in South Carolina do during Reconstruction?
Right.
You take the votes away from the colored people. He had ancestors who took votes away from colored people and bodily ejected their representatives from the state house.
How was Reconstruction ended?
It was ended when we stopped empowering these people, and we can do that again. Right.
But it is going to require the seizure of state power.
Absolutely.
And the use of state power. There's no way this works
without
we
state
just kind of
power.
like without state power, by talking it out, by no, dude, we form a partnership with the left and fight the elite or whatever it is. No. It's us versus them, and people are just going to have to accept the fact that like there's no way out of this but through. I mean, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be struggle, and at the very least, if not violence, because I don't think that it'll come to that, at least not in a systemic way, but something like the Troubles in Northern Ireland, at least, and especially in some European countries. At this point, I basically expect something like the Troubles from Northern Ireland to take place in the United Kingdom. I mean, some of these countries are just like an absolute powder keg right now. If anything, America might actually have this thing settled with less chaos than some of these countries.
Well, we're more spread out, for one thing.
That too. But of course, the problem with that is that makes it easier to ignore what's happening, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One thing that I'll close at, especially spending some time here in Europe, is that you can't ignore these kinds of things. You can't run away. There's nowhere you can go to. It's in your face in a way that in America, it's just not, because there's always somewhere you can go to in America where you can pretend things are the way you want them to be. In Europe, I don't think you can do that. And that may make the difference. So last question to you, because this is something I've been toying with for a long time. I do think that we're going to win in America. I'm far more optimistic than I used to be. And I think that there are things happening which I wouldn't have expected 10 years ago, and there are far more capable people who are willing to do what needs to be done. But I still somehow have more optimism for Europe than I do for America, just because here it just seems like victory is more inevitable. Is this just a question of the grass is greener, or is there something to that? Because in Europe, they can't ignore it. They can't run away from it. It's right in their face. And you see them mobilizing in a way that in America, we don't have a nationalist party. We just have a lot of nationalists. Here you have actual nationalist parties that are mobilizing in an organized way.
Yeah, when I remember in 2001, I was in Paris just after September 11th. I went to the Fête de Bleu Blanc Rouge in Paris, that the National Front's big rally. And I met with some British nationalists. And because September 11th had just happened, we were having a conversation about this stuff. And it was sort of a conversation about, who's really responsible, And the Americans were saying it's Jewish power, and the Britons, one of the Britons says, I work in a factory, and on the factory floor we saw Muslims celebrating this, and I said,
Well, it happened in Paterson, New Jersey too.
Yeah,
they covered it up, but it did happen.
Yeah, but I sort of sat back and I thought, actually, If these are the parameters of the debate, we really can't lose from this, right? Is it this group or that group? We really can't lose no matter what side you're on. It's like Diet Coke or regular Coke. The Coca-Cola Corporation cannot lose from that debate. But it became very clear to me that people at that time, that people in Europe are far more sensitive to small numbers of non-whites in their societies than Americans. In April of 2015, it was my first visit to Hungary, and I met this Hungarian nationalist, and he said, Greg, we have a serious race problem in Hungary. And I said, really? And he said, we have 500 Africans. And I said, what, like in the neighborhood? And he said, no, like in the whole country. and I said, I've been on subway trains in America with more than 500 Africans.
For sure, I see more than 500 of them on an average day.
Yeah, I've been in shopping centers with more than 500 of them, standing in the customs line at airports. And he looked at me very seriously, and he said, but there was a time when there were 500 of them in your country too.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you got me there.
Right.
I'm sure there are a lot more than 500 now, but it's more than a decade ago. But they're right. I mean, that level of sensitivity, this princess and a pea kind of sensitivity, is very healthy. That's important. The other thing is, they don't have goofy ideas like, we're not a people, we're an idea. Not even the French believe that nonsense.
Yeah, right.
They don't have this proposition nation stuff. It's being imposed upon them. They're trying to make that essentially American model normative in Europe, but it doesn't work. Europeans have real concrete identities, and I give them, I rate their chances very high because of that. A lot of Americans won't even admit that Americans are a people, much less a white people.
I think that's less true of younger generations.
It's
though.
true.
I think one of the key things, and I'll end with this, one of the things that I've taken away from this whole trip is that I think it's not, because one of the problems with what was happening with Hungary is people say, well, the European right was becoming more American. And that's obviously very dangerous.
It is dangerous.
Because the American right, especially as interpreted by older conservatives, is very backward looking and susceptible to all these bad things. But I think the younger American right is in its way becoming more European, which is to say that it's becoming more identitarian.
Absolutely.
And so that is something that I think should give us a lot of faith and confidence and hope, because the future is identitarian. Yeah. And this is already happening. And this is one of the things that I think is really important to take away from all this. I don't want to hear any more blackpilling from identitarians in Europe about what happened in Hungary, because I don't think it's that bad. And I certainly don't want to hear anybody saying that, oh, well, America is going to go down. I don't think this is true. I think younger Americans are increasingly aware about what needs to be done. And I think, for the first time in my life, really, I think victory is inevitable if we all do what we all know in our heart needs to be done. And step one is realizing that there's no way out of this without conflict. So if we do that, we are going to win this thing. I'm Kevin DeAnna, Greg Johnson.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me here. Catch you next time. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.